Thanks everyone for joining us today for our webinar on traditional AV is failing, how to protect your organization. My name is Kim Mahoney. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at VMware Carbon Black, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First of all, today's webinar will be recorded and the recording will be sent to you before the end of this week. We'll also be answering questions periodically, so feel free to type those at any time into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. And now I want to introduce our presenter for today, Mr. Ed Murphy. Ed is a product line manager for our VMware Carbon Black Cloud solution. A little background on Ed. He joined us back in 2012, and he currently leads the design and development of new endpoint security technologies. In his role, he works with VMware Carbon Black's Threat Analysis Unit, our TAO team, to ensure that our products stay ahead of the evolving security landscape. Prior to joining VMware Carbon Black, Ed earned a master's degree in computer security and spent 10 years supporting numerous government agencies in all aspects of security field. This included areas such as network security packet analysis, malware reverse engineering, and embedded device exploitation. Welcome, Ed. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Kim, for those kind words. Before we get into the meat of it, I wanted to give you a little overview of what we'll be talking about today. Initially, we'll kick off our conversation around the current threat landscape, including a lot of statistics referenced from both our internal threat research, as well as a number of surveys of IR partners that we do here at Carbon Black, VMware Carbon Black. We'll talk about the reality of the current traditional AV's capability of keeping up with this threat landscape. We'll go into how VMware Carbon Black can help close those gaps. And at the end, we'll offer some tips for evaluating AV. As Kim mentioned, I'll be taking questions throughout. We have a pause about halfway through where we'll field initial questions on those first two line items for the agenda. We'll finish up with some next steps and even share a report with you at the end. So let's start with the obvious. I'm sure that most, if not all of you, have heard the words on this slide before. It's just as true today as it was years ago when I joined what at the time was Carbon Black. The statement is actually what makes me most excited to be working in this field of cybersecurity. And 5 years ago when I joined the team here, after years of being in a more offensive-minded security role, I did so because I was amazed at how easy it was to bypass traditional security products and how little the market was actually doing to make these gaps known to the consumer. Later, we're going to talk a little bit about the Mitre attack framework and how this advanced in the way we communicate threats and the evaluations that Mitre Ingenuity is doing is finally shedding lights on the gaps that are not addressed as part of these other tests. I believed then, and I still do now, that VMware Carbon Black is doing the best job of arming our customers against our adversaries. Before I talk about why I feel that way, let's take a brief look at the current threat landscape we're all living in. In early 2020, VMware Carbon Black conducted a global threat research survey. This survey indicated a continued upward trend in ransomware, lateral movement, script-based attacks such as PowerShell and WMI, phishing, and financially motivated cybercrime. To me, the culmination of these 5 bullet points here indicate really 2 main points. The first is that the threats that you see listed here, ransomware, lateral movement, and script attacks, are commoditized at this point. It means any less sophisticated attacker can get their hands on oftentimes open source code and leverage it as a weapon against your environment. And secondarily, the targets of opportunity are still abundant within our environment. Drilling in on that last bullet point around financially motivated cybercrime, many industry reports indicate the majority of global attacks are financially motivated. It's easy to take a look at all the sophisticated nation-state intelligence that grabs the news headlines day in and day out and think that my business isn't as much of a target as that company. But this stat in particular shows that most of the time, attackers are after money as opposed to intelligence. Whether it's stealing CPU cycles for Bitcoin mining, capturing credit card numbers for fraud, or holding data ransom, there are many reasons why an attacker might want to access your network. In fact, our threat research team is recently tracking a threat actor that goes by the name of Maze, or more recently, the Maze Cartel. This threat actor has adopted a new technique where not only would they ransom your network, but they'd capture and exfiltrate data that they then hold and extort you for the contents of that data that might be bad to be publicly exposed, asking for even more money after you've paid a ransomware bounty. So in the previous slide, I mentioned that the study took place in early 2020, which is pre-COVID-19. The next few slides, we're going to take a look at a more recent study that we've conducted that'll shed some light on what has changed now that we are predominantly a remote workforce across the globe. 53% of IR professionals reported an increase in COVID-19 related exploitation attacks. The most daunting security challenges that they're facing during their incident response activities is an inefficiency with respect to accessing these now entirely remote endpoints. VPN vulnerabilities, now that more and more folks are connecting through VPN, it's becoming a targeted point for attackers. And finally, staff shortages. Unfortunately, throughout the US as well as globally, many companies have seen a reduced revenue and have had to adjust by laying off or furloughing valued employees. Security and IT teams are not immune to this trend. And that means that everyone out there is trying to find a way to do more with less. And speaking of that more, the FBI reported a 400% increase in cybercrime most recently. While the FBI takes a global look at cybercrime, our threat analysis unit is particularly interested in ransomware at this point in time. Global organizations are seeing a 148% spike in ransomware-related attacks in March of 2020, compared to our baseline from February of 2020. While we do see some evolution in the tactics, techniques, and procedures leveraged by these ransomware families, there's nothing that indicates this evolution in particular is specifically connected to the pandemic. However, what we do see is attackers taking advantage of the targets of opportunity by leveraging the increased global media attention to the pandemic, as well as more recently, equal rights movements. If you're anything like me, in the weeks after we announced the rapid increase of coronavirus cases here in the United States, you're inundated with every company that you've ever done business with emailing you about how they were responding to the New World Order. All it takes is one bad actor and one malicious attachment or link within an email to be put in front of a distracted or otherwise unsuspecting user to kick off a network breach. After convincing that user to execute a malicious attachment, we are increasingly seeing attackers leverage lateral movement within an organization to gain greater control. Our survey indicates that there has been a 33% increase in attacks that involve lateral movement. I believe this to be due to the fact that post-exploitation frameworks built on top of PowerShell are now commonly including modules that make this type of lateral movement easy within a network, even for the less sophisticated attacker. Whether it's using compromised credentials and actually gaining access to those credentials in the first place, or targeting unpatched vulnerabilities on the network, attackers are finding a way to move from one device to another. Going back to our theme around financially motivated cybercrime, the greater access an attacker can gain, the greater profit they can achieve from any organization. Finally, either during the breach itself or after the fact, we've noticed a 33% increase in attacks that feature counter-incident response techniques. You can think of this as something like wiping the logs, killing off processes, removing the artifacts of the attack in the first place. When threat actors clean up after themselves, they're decreasing the likelihood of exposing the tactics, techniques, and procedures leveraged during the attack. As we explore the differences between traditional and next-generation antivirus products, we'll take a look at how we combat this technique within VMware Carbon Black and why these traditional products are falling short of protecting you in these counter-incident response scenarios. So sometimes I feel as if we're telling the same story year after year, especially since I've been here at Carbon Black. So why do we continue to see an increase in areas like ransomware and lateral movement? Well, simply put, the cost of finding, buying, or deploying attack tools that can bypass traditional AV defenses is significantly less expensive than the profit that could be made by leveraging these tools against organizations and individuals. Connecting the financial story to what we're talking about today, when we look at the traditional AV players on the whole, their products and methodologies are not evolving. The landscape is evolving, and next generation providers are evolving by including capabilities such as machine learning, behavioral prevention, and really an increased amount of visibility and context into an attack where traditional AV has fallen short and is not keeping up with the pace. For more detail on why these gaps exist, I wanted to briefly introduce the Mitre attack framework. If you're not familiar with it, Mitre has released a 12 tactic level replacement for what used to be the Lockheed Martin kill chain. We are seeing a large increase in adoption of this framework for being able to describe not only the tactics that attackers are using, but the individual techniques as well. In my role as a product manager responsible for threat research, I love this framework, not only because it gives an unbiased third party's viewpoint into how these products perform, but also because it improves my communication with our customers on a day-to-day basis. We're now speaking the exact same language, and when the conversations get to the more technical variety, we can go all the way down to the technique level and how our products are helping our customers with a minute change in technique by the attackers. What you see on this slide is 7 of those 12 stages that make up Mitre attacks framework. I mentioned when we started that the attack evaluations are shining tremendous light on where traditional AV products fall short. I selected these 7 attacks today because I believe they're most relevant to a scenario that we see time and again when talking to our incident response partners or observing activity within the threat landscape. While it's true that malicious files and scripts can be leveraged during every single stage of the attack, our threat analysis unit, as well as our IR partners, commonly see tools like PowerShell or other living off the land utilities leveraged in the early stages of a breach, with the more traditional malware only appearing at the end of the attack's lifecycle. The statistics that we've seen on all the previous slides are a direct reflection of the fact that traditional AV is not keeping up with an evolving threat landscape and leaving you blind to a significant portion of the chain of attack. The sooner you can enforce prevention, the better your chances of containing a breach. So if you'll indulge me for a second, we'll take one level deeper look at the Mitre attack framework, and I'll present what it looks like with respect to a common attack that we see in and day out. In the initial access phase of the attack, we're commonly seeing phishing techniques, whether in this case, it's an attached Word document that contains macros, or even a link for a drive-by download. For initial execution, attackers are pivoting from that macro to PowerShell and leveraging PowerShell and these open source PowerShell frameworks like PowerSploit to implement the majority of the rest of their attack. In this case, we observe some process injection migrating from the PowerShell process itself to another process on the device to blend in with the noise and ultimately evade defense. We're leveraging that secondary process to perform some credential dumping. We're then doing some file discovery on the endpoint to determine where's the valuable information, what network shares might be connected to this machine. Where is the content from my financially motivation perspective that I can exploit to profit. And finally, we're going to use those credentials that we harvested to migrate laterally within the environment by authenticating to remote services such as RDP or WinRM. Now, you see below, I've indicated that each of these 5 stages has been executed leveraging PowerShell or derivatives of PowerShell in memory. There is no malware that's leveraged as part of any of this attack at this point. After I've moved laterally within the organization, many attackers are simultaneously dropping a known malware or malware that is unknown at this point, and ultimately leveraging that malware to encrypt data on the endpoint for their impact and financial gain. So now that we have gone deep into anatomy of an attack in today's world, let's take a step back to realize that there are many other areas that traditional AV is being outpaced as well. We discussed the reliance on defined malware and how that leaves gaps early in their attack framework. But traditional AV products also suffer from slow content upgrades. And I'm not talking about the signatures that they're shipping in this scenario. I'm actually talking about the evolution of the technology within these products. This slow evolution leaves the organization at risk when we see the latest threats and the numerous updates to policies that need to take place, even updates to the on-premise infrastructure that many of these traditional AV companies leverage. When they're not leveraging on-premise infrastructure, we often see that they're bolting on a cloud approach to address the software as a service market that is the world today. These approaches are hybrid, and they still contain that expensive aspects where you have to use and manage an on-premise infrastructure and make sure it has connectivity to that SaaS product. Many IT teams today just don't have the time to manage that infrastructure. In addition to the managerial challenges, these products are not providing you with the attack context that's so important to combat the counter-incident response that we observed in our threat survey. You don't get visibility and behavioral visibility into what happened on the endpoint. You don't get correlation of events to tell you how did that sample of malware actually end up on your endpoint. And finally, there's no remote access or built-in response tools, especially in the time where all of our employees are now working remotely. It's incredibly important that you have built-in in-product access to those endpoints without having to either SSH or find another way to authenticate through an RDP session to that device itself. All of this amounts to more time, more money, and more resources, increasing the amount of risks that your organization faces. I'm going to bring Kim back on to go through any questions that may have cropped up during the first half of our presentation.
Thanks, Ed. I do have a couple questions from the Q&A, and please feel free to keep submitting your questions. We'll answer more at the end. So first of all, are there any resources you can recommend for staying up to date on some of these latest attacks? Any sites or groups that usually follow?
Yeah, definitely. So our threat analysis unit is commonly publishing blog posts, whether it's in the form of a threat intelligence notification, that's a deep dive into a particular malware family, or a more broad look at, say, a threat actor like Lazarus. And that can all be found at our Carbon Black website. Additionally, I like to follow Krebs on security, dark reading, a lot of the materials that you're probably already familiar with.
Great, thank you. Another question around the data points. Will we have access to this report where you got these from?
Yes, definitely. We will share a link at the end of this presentation for all this information and more detail on those stats that we're sharing.
Okay, great. One other thing, you mentioned traditional AV products cost more time and money, but it seems when I've evaluated these products, a lot of them tend to cost more. Where does this additional cost come from in traditional AV you're referencing?
Yeah, of course, we highlighted some of that in this slide here, but it's really the management of that on-premise infrastructure included with, say, in a scenario where you are breached because AV is failing to evolve, that's either re-imaging machines, engaging with an incident response firm. So the fact that we're able to prevent more attacks before they happen is saving our customers time and money.
Okay, great. And the last question, how does carbon black work? And I think that's a great lead into our next section.
Perfect. So yeah, it would be pretty unfair of us if we provided you with a well-founded problem statement around traditional AV and didn't follow it up with at least our suggestion for a solution. So let's spend the last half of our time discussing how the VMware Carbon Black Cloud can specifically help with the problems that we've just been talking about. To protect all of your endpoints from the latest attacks, you need a solution that's easy to manage and update from anywhere at any time, and one that allows you to respond to real-time attacks. Within the Carbon Black Cloud, we make it very easy by offering a full suite of endpoint protection solutions, all of which are delivered to our customers from a single platform, single console, and a single agent. This platform supports not only Windows, Mac, and Linux, but also many of the cloud infrastructure that you see out there today. Today in particular, we're focused around NGAV, but it's really as simple as flipping a switch with no additional endpoint deployments to enable any of the other functionality that you see listed on this slide within the Carbon Black Cloud. We're doing all of this while still maintaining a very low performance utilization, returning you critical CPU cycles by not having to do constant on-demand scans within your environment. We deploy seamlessly across many geos, and from a cloud perspective, we have points of presence throughout the world, making sure that we're keeping your data where it needs to be. Endpoint Standard is our next generation antivirus and behavioral EDR solution. It addresses use cases such as a certified replacement for traditional antivirus. It combines the prevention that you see from traditional antivirus and improves upon it with detection and response from a single cloud-based solution. Our solution prevents modern attacks. We're leveraging both machine learning and behavioral prevention models to analyze endpoint data and uncover malicious activity to stop all types of attack before they reach critical systems. We include in-product intelligence. So the blog posts that I mentioned before that are on our Carbon Black website are actually shipped directly to the dashboard in the console. So you don't even have to leave our console to get that great intel from our threat analysis unit. We're also including a remediation scripts in those blogs as well. As you have access to our products, we're recommending you how you can leverage them to make the most of your investment. Ultimately, this results in cutting incident response times by providing complete real-time visibility into threats, including a visualization of an entire attack chain, and quick insight into the impact of any attacks that you may have been faced that are blocked by our platform. Our live response feature also allows you to open a remote shell into any device that's connected to your organization for immediate action, whether you want to capture the script that may have been dropped and blocked for further analysis, or whether you have to clean it up if it's not automated remediated by our product. Endpoint Standards offers a rolling 30 days of behavioral history. So not only do you get the alerts themselves stored, but you're also getting the individual behaviors for every process that we're monitoring on your endpoint. This boosts your productivity by being cloud native and enabling automation of operational tasks. For those that have the ability to interact with APIs, our platform supports many open APIs, so you can automate many of the processes that are interacting with our user interface. And finally, we have easy integration with existing tools within your security stack. We realize we're not going to be the only product, although we service the majority of, if not all of your endpoint needs. Most of our customers are leveraging SIEMs as well to collect network and endpoint data in the same place. We place specific focus around being able to integrate with your technology stack and we offer a developer relations team as well as a website to help you get us up and running within your environment very quickly. As you can see here, our prevention path has actually been proven in multiple third-party tests. The AV tests and AV comparatives, I think, are absolutely critical for any provider that's out there, whether it be traditional AV or next generation antivirus. This ultimately is table stakes in the game at this point. You need to be performing well in these tests. I'm most excited, as I mentioned before, about the Mitre attack framework and its evolution over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. We participated from the beginning, and we're going to continue to participate as we believe it's shedding light on much needed improvements within the industry. To be truly effective in preventing attacks while also being resource and cost effective, prevention has to be able to customize to the needs of your organization. The toggle on and off switches don't provide enough resolution to fit your organization's need. They force companies to make trade-offs between the risk they're willing to face versus the functionality that their end users need. With our ability to adapt our prevention policies to your environment at a granular level, we're not forcing you into these trade-offs. So Endpoint Standards enables you to understand the behaviors and the pattern of events in your organization. Take that understanding and adapt your prevention policies to put you in the most strict security posture possible with your environment. We also include the ability to approve or ban specific behaviors, software providers, or even down to the individual hash level. Ultimately, this results in minimized user disruption. I mentioned a couple of times our real-time response and remediation capabilities. What you're seeing here is a screenshot of our console with a live session with one of the endpoints connected to the platform. There are a number of commands that you can leverage within this environment, and is a tremendous benefit to all of our incident response partners out there, as well as our customers. It gives you access from anywhere from the console through this cloud native platform that we offer. It enables you to clean up any artifacts that may be left behind after the prevention of an attack. The beauty of having a cloud native platform is that we can very rapidly evolve the capabilities in our environment. For example, we're most recently shipping added prevention of script-based attacks. Now, script-based attacks have been preventable by our products since their origin. But as these continue to evolve and be commoditized, we need to make this easier and easier for our customer. With this upcoming release, you can think of it as a more seamless with an improved out-of-the-box experience. In the screenshot here, you're seeing an example of one of those preventions in action. Here, we found a script attempting to execute malicious content. It's been identified as known malware. The script content was actually identified as known malware, leveraging advanced heuristics from Carbon Black's threat analysis organization. And we took the action of denying it on your behalf. I mentioned we doubled down in particular in PowerShell. Remember, I've mentioned many times in this presentation, in particular our New World attack, around how PowerShell is so heavily leveraged. Now, we believe it's important for our customers not only to know that we're stopping the attacks on their behalf, but when they need it, they need that visibility and ease of interpretation of the content that's being passed in these PowerShell commands. It gives you added confidence that the PowerShell script that we just prevented from running is truly malicious, and you're not going to get a call from an angry user. In fact, the VMware Carbon Black Cloud is the first EPP product to offer a built-in investigation capabilities that show you the exact commands behind obfuscated Microsoft PowerShell scripts, independent of what some people may know around the AMSI capabilities. So we support this deobfuscation not only on Windows 10, but prior Windows version as well. We provide you with PowerShell insights on these older legacy systems. Okay, so we've covered a lot today, and I wanted to move on now to our key takeaways for the session before opening up for more questions and answers. There's really never been a more vital time to replace outdated traditional antivirus products. As we've learned, it's imperative that you have, with the majority of your employees working remotely, it's imperative that you have a cloud-based solution for prevention that gives you that cloud and remote access. You need built-in response capabilities for real-time remediation. And with cyber attacks constantly evolving, you need to ensure that you have the latest and greatest protection and it's staying up to date with a product that's updating content capabilities from the cloud. And finally, it's vital that at this point you're blocking behaviors of processes as opposed to just the process themselves. With our Carbon Black Cloud, we try to make securing your organization as easy as possible in all of these scenarios. All right. Kim, do we have any more questions that have come in?
We do have a couple more questions, and feel free to keep typing them in, and I'll keep an eye out. Okay. So first of all, what happens when the system is offline, can't reach the cloud? Will they still be protected with the Carbon Black Cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually a common concern that we hear as we're going through proof of concept. The benefit of our product is that from a preventative perspective, we're actually deploying all of the prevention-related rules down to that endpoint. So they're stored locally, and they're going to be enforced regardless of whether or not the endpoint is connected to a cloud environment. Now behavioral data that we're capturing while that device is offline will immediately be pushed up to the cloud at the next point in time where it gains network connectivity. And there's a cache on the endpoint that enables us for that historical information to be uploaded, so you won't have a gap in your visibility.
Another one, is the cloud component hosted in the VMware cloud, or could it be hosted in a local VMware cloud in a hosted cloud platform provider?
Yeah, so the cloud component is actually hosted by VMware Carbon Black. So you don't have to even use a private cloud in this scenario. Our VMware Carbon Black as a whole offers some on-premise products as well if you need that type of support. But the NGV capabilities that we're talking about today are all hosted for you on your behalf, no overhead, no management for you. Our team is there and updating and making sure it's online all the time for y'all.
Great. What infrastructure is required on our end to host the solution?
Yeah, same answer there. No infrastructure. It's all hosted up in the cloud. So yeah, it's hands-free from that perspective. You just need to be able to deploy out the initial installer, and then from there, all the command and control is through our cloud.
Similar vein, how much will it affect our system performance?
It's a very low, lightweight endpoint. What we've really seen as more and more customers are converting from traditional antivirus is that they're being hit hard by the constant need to scan files on disk or in memory. We do so intelligently based off of the heuristics that we've developed over time. So we decrease the number of files that we're scanning, and ultimately that's returning those critical CPU cycles to you.
Easy one. Can I have a copy of this recording? And yes, we will be sending that out at the end of the week. Another interesting one, how do you compare to other endpoint security platforms, not traditional AV?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a lot of competition within the market as more and more people need to move away from traditional AV. Of course, more and more companies are going to want to offer solutions there. I'd say one of our primary differentiators we did highlight on this call, and that's the adaptability of the solution. A lot of our competitors are still kind of taking that toggle-based mindset where either something's on or it's off, and there's very little configuration you can do. And with the feature that we just highlighted that'll be released within a few weeks, We are the first provider, as I mentioned, to provide this deep visibility into the PowerShell content that we see leveraged in attacks all the time.
I'm not sure if we know this one, but do we have any documentation related to how to align Carbon Black with other VMware products like VCD and NSX?
Yeah, so definitely we're working. So we joined VMware about a year ago now. We're working really closely with all the business units in VMware. We have specific integrations with Workspace ONE Intelligence right now. So that's awesome from my perspective because you can connect the intelligence that Workspace ONE provides you about a user to the intelligence that the Carbon Black Cloud offers you about a device. And not only if you see a device being compromised, you can essentially shut down that entire user's account. In addition, we're working with partnerships with NSX at the network level, and we do. Any of your sales team would be able to provide you with documentation on each of those integrations for the products that you may have in your environment. Another one that excites me is our integration with the VMware Horizon VDI environment. We're really closely connected to that team, and there's going to be a lot of benefits of us being a part of VMware today.
Okay, another one about FedRAMP. So are you certified and what level can it be hosted in GovCloud?
Yeah, so we are currently not FedRAMP certified, although we are under immediate action on that account. We'll very shortly, I believe, it's in 2021 that will be our initial level of certification, but we will certainly follow up with you on very specific timeline information there. It's a huge priority for us within the products organization. We're not there now, and we will be there soon.
How does this protect against polymorphic malware?
Oh, great question. So a lot of problems we see with polymorphic malware is it's really tough to author a signature from a traditional AV provider that's going to track the rapid change you see within the byte content of that file. So in our case, we're partially addressing that through machine learning that we're delivering down to the endpoint and really addressing it at the behavioral level. So even if you're changing the entire contents of a file underneath their hood, you're still going to need to leverage the same behaviors to gain that access and to propagate through a network. So we leverage a defense in depth model where we can lock down not only through machine learning, but also through behavioral prevention.
Okay, great. Another one, if a file is quarantined, will it go to the cloud? What if it's a classified company document?
Yeah, so we are very cognizant of user privacy. Any cloud upload of files is done in one of two ways. One, there's a feature that all of our customers need to opt into. So by default, this is off. But we can upload files. In particular, we just focus on the portable executable file types. So those executables, we're not uploading any Office documents, so there's no concern around PII there. In addition, you can request any file on demand from the platform. So if there's a file, if you're not comfortable with automatically uploading files through this feature, you can on demand request a file that you see as concerning within your environment, and we'll just pull it up and host it in the cloud for you.
Another one, can you share a Gartner report on Carbon Black? And I think I can answer this one. We do have rights to distribute that report. We can certainly do that, send out a link after, and I will look for your email for that. Thank you. One other thing, how often is your prevention policies updated? You mentioned, there was one policy and it was easy, but how often do they get updated?
Yeah, so there's two aspects of our prevention. So there's the always on, always updating capabilities that are powered by our threat analysis unit and our threat research teams. Those are delivered, typically on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, if there's need to update those rules. The other aspect is the prevention policies within our product are actually customer demand as well. So if you read a new threat intelligence notification around behavioral preventions, you have the capability to test that out in your environment and specifically apply it at a time where you feel you're ready, and that it's not going to negatively impact the business operations.
Okay. I have this is an interesting one. How would you integrate this into a computer virtualization course being taught in college? Let's see, is there a way to create a lab environment for this?
Yeah, so it's definitely possible. I memean, VMware offers a lot of great virtualization technology. We're actually working with our partners at VMware to embed this as an agentless offering within vSphere products. But we do run in virtual desktop infrastructure. We do run in all virtual devices. You'd be able to install this in any virtualized environment. It still has connectivity to the cloud, so it's really not much different than installing on a traditional endpoint.
Okay. Do we have any self-paced training or fundamental training on carbon black security?
Yes, I know in particular that all of our customers get access to a complete suite of training on our products. I'd have to follow up with respect to what's available to kind of the general public, but for sure, if you're a customer of ours, you have on-demand access to training, as well as we offer training classes, professional services, whatever you need to do to get up and running with our products in your environment.
Let's see, what else? Will this product protect my remote users? I think we had something similar to that earlier.
Yep, definitely. I mean, as a cloud native product, that's one of our core use cases where once you get that agent installed on that user's device, it's going to follow them wherever they go. It doesn't need any connectivity to corporate infrastructure. It doesn't need to be routed through a VPN. We have support for proxies if you're running a proxy in your environment, but your remote users are just as protected as a user that's in your organization.
We have another person requesting additional information on Horizon DAAS, data as a service, I assume. I'm not sure if we can expand on that today, but we can certainly get back to you.
I think for that one, we'll have to follow up with our VMware colleagues and get the answers that you need.
Okay, I think that's mostly it. Thank you again for being here today, and thank you, Ed, so much for presenting. I hope you found this informative. We're really happy to have you here. Thank you and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for sticking around with us. It's great to be able to interact with folks. I know coronavirus is putting us in a weird state, but I love getting out to talk to our customers and prospects. So I look forward to meeting all of you in a more one-on-one scenario in the future.